Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. The clock ticked past midnight, the only sound in our otherwise silent bedroom. The soft hum of the city outside our window played a distant, second to the rhythm of my own heartbeat, thudding in my ears. I turned to my wife, Emma, her form a gentle hill under our quilt. The moonlight spilled through the blinds, casting stripes across her peaceful face. "Babe, you awake?" I whispered, not sure why I was whispering in the quiet that enveloped us. There was a slight shift, the rustle of fabric as Emma stirred. "Hmm." Her voice was a sleepy murmur, a soft sound that somehow filled the room. I hesitated, my mind racing with the question that had been haunting me for weeks. Now, in the dead of night, it felt like the right time. Or perhaps the coward's time, when confrontation could be deflected by sleep or feigned tiredness. "Can I ask you something? How come after nearly 25 years together, you've changed in bed?" Emma turned, and I could just make out her expression in the dim light, an eyebrow raised in question, or perhaps confusion. "I've always been into you, Mark," she grumbled, clearly struggling to ward off sleep. I watched her, my heart in my throat. This wasn't just about intimacy. It was about us, about everything we built together. "You have, but it's never seemed like you enjoyed it." "Not really." "What's changed?" Emma turned to face me fully, her gray eyes now open and alert. A playful smile danced on her lips. "I didn't hear you complaining." That smile, that damn smile that had first drawn me to her at that backyard barbecue all those years ago, made me chuckle despite myself. "I'm not complaining, Em. I'm just curious." Her smile faded a bit, replaced by a thoughtful look. "Curious? After all this time, what's there to be curious about?" "I don't know. Maybe I'm just—" "Why after all these years did you decide to let things happen that you haven't let happen since we were practically kids?" She sat up, pulling the quilt around her as she did. "Mark, what are you really asking me here? Is this about us, or is there something else?" Her directness caught me off guard. This was Emma in her element, confronting issues head-on while I danced around them. "It's just, you've been different, Em. More willing to explore." "I'm trying to understand why now." Emma's face was a mixture of emotions: surprise, confusion, a hint of annoyance. "And this bothers you?"
No,
"No, it's been amazing, actually. But it's such a shift, Em. Before, it felt like you were doing it more for me than for us. And now, I feel like you're actually into it. I'm trying to understand where this is coming from." Her demeanor softened, and she reached out, her hand finding mine in the moonlight. "Mark, I love you. You know that, right? And after all these years, I thought, maybe it's time to try something new, to rediscover each other." I squeezed her hand, the warmth of her skin reassuring. "I love you too, Em. More than anything. I just want to make sure everything's okay. You haven't been reading those spice up your marriage articles, have you?" Emma laughed, a genuine, heartfelt sound. "Would it be so bad if I had?" "No, I guess not." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "It's just that, after all this time, I thought I knew everything about you. This is new. And I'm just trying to catch up." Emma leaned in, her forehead touching mine. "Maybe that's the point, Mark. Maybe we're not supposed to know everything about each other. Maybe part of the fun is the discovery, even after 25 years." Her words hung in the air between us, a new truth, a new path for us to explore together. And in that moment, with the night wrapping around us, I realized that this was just another chapter in our story. A story that was far from over, filled with pages yet to be written, experiences yet to be shared. "Okay," I whispered back, my voice steadier now. Let's discover then. Together. Emma's smile in the moonlight was all the answer I needed. The glow of dawn barely touched the horizon, casting a soft light that seeped through the blinds, signaling a new day. Yet the weight of the night's conversation lingered, heavy like a cloak around my shoulders. I rose with the sun, my mind a whirlwind of doubts and questions. Today, I would seek answers. I dressed quietly, Emma's soft breathing a constant reminder of the distance growing between us. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound final, like the turning of a page to a chapter one was hesitant to start. The city was waking up, its early stirrings a mirror to the turmoil inside me. My first stop was the gym. The physical exertion, I hoped, would clear my head, prepare me for what lay ahead. The weights felt heavier today, each lift a question, each drop an unanswered doubt. The clock's hands moved relentlessly forward, marking time that seemed to both crawl and race towards the inevitable. Showered and changed, I found myself at a familiar diner, a place that had seen many a breakfast meeting turn into a makeshift office. Today, it was a sanctuary, a place to gather my thoughts over a cup of coffee that I barely tasted. My phone, usually a tether to the world, lay silent beside me, a testament to the isolation I felt. I turned it on, bracing for the onslaught of missed calls and messages, but there was only one that mattered. A message from the private investigator I had reluctantly hired 6 weeks ago. The investigation was complete. My heart sank and soared at the same time. Answers were within reach, but did I truly want them? I sent a text to my boss, Stacy, asking to meet before work. There was no going back now. The wheels were in motion, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together, and I was both the architect and the observer of my own fate. Stacy arrived, her keen eyes missing nothing. "You look terrible," she stated bluntly, her concern palpable. "Yeah, feel even worse," I admitted, the weight of my secret suddenly too heavy to bear alone. "Is there something going on at work?" she asked, ever the professional. I shook my head, the words tumbling out in a rush. "It's personal. I think Emma might be cheating on me. I've hired a private investigator, and I'm meeting him this morning to get the details." Stacy's reaction was a mix of shock and support. "How can I support you?" she asked, her voice steady. I shrugged, lost. "Unless you have a magic solution, there's not much anyone can do." Our conversation turned to practical matters, but my mind was elsewhere, on the precipice of a truth I was not sure I could face. The private investigator's report loomed large, a Pandora's box of potential heartbreak and betrayal. As Stacy left, promising unwavering support, I couldn't help but feel like I was standing at a crossroads, the path behind me fading into the past, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. The meeting with the private investigator was a blur, the photos, texts, and emails a mosaic of betrayal that painted a picture I could no longer deny. Emma's affair was not just a suspicion. It was a reality documented in stark, unforgiving detail. I left the meeting in a daze, the report a physical manifestation of the chasm between Emma and me. The drive to the university campus, where I would break the news to our daughters, was automatic, my mind numb, my heart a battleground of anger, hurt, and an overwhelming sense of loss. "Dad, what's going on?" "Mom's been calling nonstop," Julie, our eldest, asked, her voice tinged with worry. I gathered my daughters, my resolve firming. "There's something I need to tell you both," I began, the words heavy on my tongue. "Your mother and I, our marriage is in trouble." The conversation that followed was one of the hardest I've ever had. Their questions, their tears, and their shock mirrored my own. I shared the truth, not to hurt them, but to arm them with reality as we faced an uncertain future together. The drive back was a lonely one, the silence a stark contrast to the turmoil within. I was a man adrift, the life I knew irrevocably altered, the path ahead uncertain. But one thing was clear. The investigation was just the beginning. The real journey, fraught with pain, discovery, and hopefully healing, was just beginning. The world outside whirred by in a blur of colors and shapes as I drove to Stacy's cottage, my mind as tumultuous as the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The weight of the private investigator's report sat like a leaden companion in the passenger seat, its contents a testament to the shattered reality of my marriage. Arriving at the lake, the cottage stood solitary against the backdrop of churning waters, a symbol of the isolation I felt. The key, previously given by Stacy with a mix of concern and solemnity, felt heavy in my hand, a key not just to a physical refuge, but to a temporary escape from the pain that awaited confrontation. As I settled in, the phone calls and messages from Emma intensified, each ring a sharp reminder of the conversation that loomed ahead. Ignoring them, I focused on the immediate task at hand, preparing myself mentally for the confrontation with my daughters. Their reactions, their questions, they deserved the truth, but how to deliver such a blow without breaking them further? The drive to the university was a silent one, my thoughts a cacophony that drowned out the sound of the engine and the sporadic drops of rain beginning to hit the windshield. Julie and Kate's faces, when I finally saw them, were a mix of confusion and concern, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. "Dad, what's going on?" Mom's been freaking out. Julie's voice was strained, her usual composure frayed at the edges. Sitting them down, I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed dissolving under the weight of their expectant gazes. "Girls," I began, my voice faltering, "I've discovered something about your mom." The silence that followed was palpable, heavy with unspoken dread. "She's been unfaithful," the words, once spoken, hung between us like a specter, irrevocable and damning. The shock on their faces was a physical blow, their immediate cries of disbelief and hurt a chorus of pain that echoed my own. "But Dad, are you sure?" Kate's voice was small, her eyes searching mine for some mistake, some error in judgment. The evidence was laid out, the photos, the messages, a timeline of betrayal that painted a picture too detailed to be denied. Their reactions varied from anger to despair, roller coaster of emotion that mirrored the journey I had been on since hiring the investigator. The drive back was a somber one, the rain now a torrent that seemed to cleanse the air, if not the wound that had been opened. The cottage, once a refuge, now felt like a prison, the walls echoing with the remnants of the life I had known. That night, as the storm raged outside, I lay awake, the events of the day replaying in an endless loop. The revelation, while freeing in its clarity, had torn open a chasm too wide to bridge with words alone. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with the debris of broken trust and shattered illusions. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a resolve began to form, a determination to face the coming storm head-on, to rebuild from the ashes of what had been. The revelation, though painful, was a necessary step toward healing, a painful but essential part of the journey toward understanding and, eventually, forgiveness. The rain eventually subsided, the first light of dawn casting a new light on the world outside, a symbol of the new day that lay ahead and the new challenges it would bring. The journey was far from over, but for the first time since the investigation began, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that, perhaps, there was a path forward, however uncertain it might be. The morning after the revelation to Julie and Kate felt like waking up to a different world, one where the familiar contours of my life had shifted into something unrecognizable. The air in the cottage felt heavier, the light that filtered through the windows too harsh, as if highlighting the stark reality I now faced. I had barely touched my coffee when my phone erupted with a cacophony of notifications, a relentless reminder that the world outside continued to move, oblivious to the upheaval in my own. Emma's name flashed across the screen, each call and message a stab of reminder of the confrontation that awaited. Steeled for the storm ahead, I dialed my parents. The phone felt like lead in my hand, each ring a countdown to the moment I would shatter their perception of a happy family. "Mark? Is everything all right?" My mom's voice was a balm, yet a reminder of the pain I was about to inflict. I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed suddenly inadequate. Mom, Dad, there's something you need to know about Emma and me. The silence that followed was laden with dread. I plunged ahead, the words tumbling out in a rush. Emma's been having an affair. I found out recently. It's over between us. The shock, the disbelief, the hurt that poured through the phone line was palpable. My father's voice, when he finally spoke, was strained. Son, are you sure about this? Emma's part of this family. The assurance of the evidence, laid bare to my parents, was a cold comfort. Their support was unwavering, yet tinged with the sorrow of lost illusions. The next call was to Emma's parents, Frank and Eileen. The weight of betrayal felt heavier, knowing I was about to tarnish their image of their daughter. Mark? What's wrong? Eileen's voice was filled with concern, a premonition of the bombshell I was about to drop. Eileen, Frank, I'm sorry to have to tell you this way, but Emma and I are getting a divorce. She's been unfaithful. The gasp from Eileen, the heavy silence from Frank, it was like watching the pieces of a well-loved but fragile vase shatter on the ground. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest I'd ever had, a mix of denial, anger, and finally, heartbroken acceptance. Armed with the grim determination to see this through, I arranged to meet with Mary Beth and Phil, friends who had unknowingly played a part in this unfolding drama. The coffee shop where we met was a neutral ground, yet it felt like stepping into a battlefield. Mary Beth's greeting was cheerful, oblivious to the storm she was about to be caught in. Mark, this is a surprise. What's up? I didn't mince words. It's about Emma. And Mike. I know everything. The color drained from Mary Beth's face, Phil's joviality replaced with confusion. What do you mean, Mark? The evidence was laid out, irrefutable and damning. Mary Beth's attempts at justification, Phil's stunned silence. It was a grotesque parody of the social gatherings we had once enjoyed. Mary Beth, you encouraged her. You're as much to blame for this mess. The accusation hung heavy between us, a line crossed from which there was no return. The fallout was immediate. Accusations flew. Old friendships crumbled under the weight of betrayal and lies. I left them sitting there, a tableau of shock and disbelief, a stark contrast to the sunny day outside. The drive back to the cottage was a blur, the landscape outside reflecting the turmoil within. The fallout from the revelation was spreading, a ripple effect that touched everyone Emma and I knew. Yet, amidst the chaos, a resolve was hardening within me, a determination to rebuild from the ashes of my broken marriage, to find a path forward for myself and my daughters. The cottage, once a place of refuge, now felt like a cage. The solitude it offered was a double-edged sword, providing space to think but also to dwell on the pain and betrayal. The fallout was just beginning, but I knew that the only way out was through. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and the need to redefine who I was in the wake of Emma's betrayal. But I was determined to face it head-on, to emerge from this storm stronger and more resilient. The fallout was devastating, but it would not define me. The morning sun was a false friend, its bright cheer mocking the storm brewing in my heart. Today was the day of reckoning, the day I would confront Emma about the shattered remnants of our life together. The weight of the private investigator's report in my bag felt like carrying a grenade, primed to explode the moment I arrived at our once shared home. I rehearsed the confrontation in my head as I drove, each scenario more daunting than the last. The quiet streets were a stark contrast to the chaos within me, each turn bringing me closer to the inevitable. Pulling into the driveway, I saw Emma through the window, her posture tense, a reflection of the turmoil I felt. I steeled myself and entered, the door creaking open like the first line of a chapter one was hesitant to read. Mark, Emma's voice was barely a whisper, laden with a mix of fear and anticipation. You're here. I nodded, unable to find my voice. The air between us was charged, a palpable tension that made the room feel smaller, more oppressive. I know about Mike, I finally said, the words falling between us like stones into still water, causing ripples that couldn't be undone. Emma flinched, as if struck, her face draining of color. Mark, no. I cut her off, the pain and anger I had been nursing coming to the fore. How could you do this to us? To our family? The confrontation was raw, each word we exchanged sharper than the last, a verbal sparring that left us both wounded, exposed. Emma's justifications, her explanations, they sounded hollow, even to her ears. She spoke of loneliness, of feeling taken for granted, but they sounded like excuses even to her. You destroyed us, Emma. For what? A fling? It wasn't just a fling. Her defense was passionate, desperate. I thought I found something I was missing. But I was wrong. I lost everything. The room was thick with the weight of unspoken words and shattered dreams. In her eyes, I saw not just the woman I had loved, but a stranger, someone who had made choices I could never understand. As the confrontation wound down, the exhaustion set in, a deep, soul-weary tiredness that made every movement, every thought, heavier. We were two people, bound by years of shared life, now divided by betrayal. Leaving the house felt like leaving a part of myself behind, a version of me that believed in happy endings and unbreakable vows. The drive to the lake was automatic, my mind numb, replaying the confrontation over and over, searching for some understanding, some closure that remained elusive. The lake was calm, a mirror reflecting the tumultuous sky, a metaphor for the storm that had passed and the uneasy peace that followed. I sat on the dock, the report by my side, a reminder of the journey I had undertaken, from suspicion to confirmation to confrontation. Reflections on the water, like thoughts, were scattered, broken by the occasional ripple. I thought of Emma, of our daughters, of the life we had built together, now irrevocably changed. The confrontation had not brought the peace I sought. If anything, it had opened new wounds, exposed new pains. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a clarity, a realization that despite the hurt, life would go on. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and the need to redefine who I was in the wake of Emma's betrayal. But there was also a sense of liberation, a release from the web of lies and deceit that had ensnared us. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a resolve forming within me, a determination to rebuild, to find a new way forward. The confrontation had been necessary, a step towards healing, towards understanding. The reflections on the lake deepened as the light faded, turning the world into shades of gray. It was a moment of transition, of endings and beginnings. The road ahead was long, and I was just at the start, but for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a cautious optimism, a belief that, somehow, I would find my way through this storm. The chapter of confrontation and reflection was closed, but the story of my journey was far from over. It was a narrative still being written, with pain and loss, but also with hope and the possibility of renewal. The dawn broke with a hesitant light, seeping through the curtains of the cottage and painting the room in a soft glow that felt like the gentle touch of understanding. Today marked a new beginning, a step into the unknown, propelled by the revelations and confrontations of the days past. My heart, though scarred, felt lighter, unburdened by the secrets that had once weighed it down. I stood by the lake, the early morning mist rising like spirits from the water, a visual metaphor for the lifting of my own fog of confusion and despair. The decision to move on was not made in haste but born from the tumultuous journey of heartache and self-discovery. The cottage, once a refuge in my storm, now felt too small, too filled with the echoes of my solitude. It was time to leave, to find my way back into the world that had continued to turn in my absence. Packing my belongings felt symbolic, each item a piece of the life I was leaving behind, and perhaps a step towards the future I was yet to build. The drive from the cottage to the city was a contemplation, the landscape changing from the wild, untamed beauty of nature to the structured chaos of human existence. My first stop was the new apartment I had secured, a modest space that felt both exciting and intimidating in its emptiness. The act of moving in, of arranging my few possessions, was cathartic, a physical manifestation of my internal resolve to start anew. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in the routines of daily life, finding solace in the normalcy of work, the casual interactions with colleagues, and the quiet evenings spent in the solitude of my new home. Yet, the most significant steps towards moving on came from the conversations with my daughters. "Dad, how are you really doing?" Julie's voice was laced with concern, her eyes searching mine for the truth that lay beneath the surface. "I'm getting there, Jules," I replied, honesty coloring my tone. "It's not easy, but I'm learning to look forward, not back." Kate, ever the quiet observer, added her own wisdom. "We're here for you, Dad. We always will be." Their support, unwavering and unconditional, was a beacon of hope in the lingering darkness, a reminder that though the fabric of our family had been irrevocably altered, the bonds that held us together remained strong. The weeks turned into months, and with time, the sharp edges of my pain dulled, softened by the accumulation of new experiences, new connections, and the slow rebuilding of my life. Emma and I found a way to coexist in this new reality, our interactions marked by a cautious civility that belied the depth of our shared history. The journey of moving on was not a linear path but a series of steps, some forward, some backward, each one a lesson in forgiveness, resilience, and the enduring capacity for change. One evening, as I sat on the small balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire and gold, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, the heartache, they were all part of the story, but they did not define it. Moving on was a choice, a daily decision to embrace the possibilities of the present and the promise of the future, to find beauty in the broken places and strength in the healing. It was a recognition that while some chapters had to end, the story of my life was still being written, filled with the potential for new adventures, new loves, and new beginnings. The night fell, and the stars emerged, a glittering tapestry of light against the velvet darkness, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the small, yet significant, place we occupy within it. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the past, and an eager anticipation for the chapters yet to come. Moving on was not forgetting, but remembering with less pain, looking back with less regret, and looking forward with hope. It was a journey not of erasure, but of growth, not of ending, but of evolving. As the night deepened, I made a silent vow to myself to embrace the journey with an open heart and an open mind, to live fully in each moment, and to write the rest of my story with intention, courage, and love. The path ahead was uncharted, but I was ready to take the first step, confident in the knowledge that whatever the future held, I had the strength to face it, to overcome it, and to thrive.